So we exist as an organism because the 10,000 cells of our sinoatrial node, the heart's pacemaker, they learn to tick at the same time. They learn to have that output and then relax, and pulse and then relax, which is the heart beating and then relaxing, contracting and relaxing. And that is a fundamental rhythm of everything. It's the rhythm of the heart rate, but it's the rhythm of the breath, because we breathe in and the heart rate goes up, and we breathe out and the heart rate goes down. And all of those rhythms are then stacked and nested one within the other, including like the rhythm of waking and sleeping, called the circadian rhythm. So we're awake during the day and we're resting at night. And all of those ups and downs are meant to be efficiently and harmoniously stacked up with each other. And when they are well stacked, we are well synchronized, we are well. And when we are not, we feel unwell.
Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast, where we explore how slowing down can unlock deeper clarity, healing, and sustainable growth. Today, I'm joined by Stephen Hoskinson, founder of Organic Intelligence and a globally recognized leader in the field of post-trauma growth. For over 2 decades, Stephen has been teaching, training, and guiding individuals and organizations around the world. His work spans from serving as adjunct faculty at JFK School of Psychology, advising the Trauma Foundation, and a contributing and founding member of the International Transformational Resilience Coalition's National Steering Committee. You may have also seen him on Dr. Mark Hyman's Broken Brain docuseries, or presenting at the Plum Village Neuroscience Retreat in France. As Director of Education for Organic Intelligence, Stephen has developed a science-backed coach certification program designed to help people grow and heal, while learning how to support others in doing the same. In this episode, we explore what it really means to grow after trauma and how the nervous system holds the key to healing and slowing down, so then we can move forward when we're ready. So let's get started. All right, Stephen, I just want to welcome you to the Go Slow to Go Fast lifestyle podcast. Thank you for being here and agreeing to sit down with us today.
Well, thank you too. I mean, even without knowing anything about your podcast, seeing that go slow to go fast, it's like, yep, sign me up for that one.
Right. Well, this is usually where I ask my guests, what does it mean to you? So what does go slow to go fast mean to you, and how are you doing that these days?
For us in Organic Intelligence, it's all about readiness. We are looking at a coaching process, but also a lifestyle process. And readiness for us means biological readiness. There's kind of psychological readiness, there's emotional readiness. We're looking at it from the standpoint of the physiology and what is ready to be taken in, what's ready to be assimilated. And we're gauging that by a kind of criteria of biological readiness. Like as an educator, there are developmental milestones, and we have those kinds of developmental milestones laid into a biological evolution also that we have. And so we are looking at a kind of sequence of ideas, thoughts, and practices that are trending toward what the biology wants, what it's ready for, and we're aiming to provide the support for people along those lines of readiness. And if you're not in readiness, then you're probably going too fast. There can be too slow, but the sweet spot in that is typically more go slow to go fast, just because society and our world is just advocating for keeping the pedal to the metal.
Yes, I agree. I think that culture of go, go, go can really put pressure on people to keep the pace of that mindset. I find it fascinating that you have really made it. I don't know if you did this on purpose, making it the differentiation between artificial intelligence versus organic intelligence, but I'm thinking you had some thought process around that as you were creating this platform. So, can you just share a little bit more about organic intelligence and what that is all about?
Yeah, it builds nicely on the notion of readiness and biological readiness. This is good news, I think, for all of us. Organic intelligence preceded artificial intelligence, and so we really have been focused on what are the conditions in which we can evolve. What is natural to our system given that we're in an unnatural situation. Our human evolution really came around through, eons of living as hunter-gatherers, tribal configuration in the late Pleistocene. The conditions really changed about 10,000, 15,000 years ago when around the world, around the globe, our people became less about hunter-gatherer and more about accumulators. We figured out the domestication of plants and animals, and then the accumulation of things began to create larger societies and began to be equated with survival. Oh, hoard some grains and we'll store them up, and that'll get us through the winter. And so we won't have to be having those lean times so much anymore. But what it actually created was hierarchy, where those with, we've sort of confused those who are accumulating means capital with those who have then and are given power. And this hierarchy then has really undone the natural, organic relationship of people to people and humanity really leaning on each other. If you and I both, I think, live in smaller communities where you recognize like your relationship with your neighbors really matters because the lights may go out, your freezer may go out, you need somebody with a generator, you get the tomatoes from your friends with the garden, and somebody that knows welding can help you put your truck back together, and you're really depending on each other because you can't kind of do it all yourself. And with the accumulation process, then the resources began to be concentrated within certain individuals and certain people then who would have power. So in organic intelligence, we are getting back to what is like natural for our system. And we understand that in terms of the science of sync. That is, we are organisms. Like the most basic thing to our organism is synchrony and synchronization. So we exist as an organism because like the 10,000 cells of our sinoatrial node, the heart's pacemaker, they learn to tick at the same time. They learn to have that output and then relax, and pulse and then relax, which is the heart beating and then relaxing, contracting and relaxing. And that is a fundamental rhythm of everything. It's the rhythm of the heart rate, but it's the rhythm of the breath, because we breathe in and the heart rate goes up, and we breathe out and the heart rate goes down. And all of those rhythms are then stacked and nested one within the other, including like the rhythm of waking and sleeping, called the circadian rhythm. So we're awake during the day and we're resting at night. And all of those ups and downs are meant to be efficiently and harmoniously stacked up with each other. And when they are well stacked, we are well synchronized, we are well. And when we are not, we feel unwell. And so organic intelligence has simply discovered, and through, a mere 30 years of trial and error, we have discovered how our systems can return to sync, how our systems can return to wellness, taking into account this notion of the rhythmicity of our system and the rhythmicity of the biology. And just a long story, a little bit shorter, it's really good news because our biology wants to return to that. And we've simply lost track of it because of current situations that we've described, people just going too fast, and hastened by the fact that our attention is hijacked, in particular by what's called the negativity bias, which is simply the attention to what's wrong and the emphasis on challenge, and the way our attention gets drawn to all the things that are problematic, And then we get jacked up into our fight, flight, and freeze mode, and we get jacked up into our fear mongering about those on the left or those on the right, or the politics or the global climate, all the things that are wrong in effect, then keep our system overly accelerated too fast. And so part of the solution for sure is going to be to slow down. But there are specific methods that are cued to the way the biology works that we can use and help ourselves get back into that rhythm, which is, of course, a slower rhythm.
Speaking of rhythm, would you say that you, in your journey of discovering organic intelligence, where along your path did you find it, would you say, in your time?
Man, I look back to when I was a youngster, and my family were from, sort of Depression era farm, rural, Kentuckians, and then moved to the big city, Louisville. And I remember my mom standing me up on a chair and looking out, and because there were some bushes outside the window, and there was a robin building a nest. And she said, "Look, Steve, here's the robin, and look how they're building this nest." And here we were in our home looking at the robin, and she said that then the mama bird will lay those eggs, and then nesting will take place, and they'll keep those eggs warm, and then the baby chicks will come out, and they'll go find their. And she was describing cycles of nature, right? And understanding that our life is connected to the life that we see in nature. And so the start of this began in the earliest days of understanding that somehow we are nature, that in nature are lessons too about who we are in our nature. And it just set me on this path of trying to discover what is most essential to our human nature.
So, as a small child, your mom was showing you those life cycles of nature. Where did you start to find an interest in psychology and all of the training that you've had in your experience?
Yeah, I have approached human wellness firstly from the standpoint of spirituality, and that my first step into the concern for the well being of people was through the concern for their deepest spiritual aspirations. And so after I studied religion, I studied theology, I was in contemplative practice. I did my first zazen, in college in the early 80s. And then I went and I was working in between college. After college, I went and I was working at an inner city health clinic in Washington, D.C. And we were serving people that were refugees, that were homeless, that were chronically mentally ill, and I realized that I needed bigger skills, that if I was going to really address people's needs, I was going to have to address them on the whole range of their life experience, which is from spiritual to psychological. And as I went then to clinical psychology school, in part because my grades weren't that amazing, but I went to Wake Forest in North Carolina, and there I met Maya Angelou. And Dr. Angelo then was super helpful for me, including eventually writing a letter to the school that I was going to go to in clinical psychology, and I think got me into the school. And so I am here because I was in clinical psychology school, but because of Dr. Maya Angelou. And I began to study then the integration of theology and psychology, and then realized you have to tunnel back into the biology. And for that, my first mentor was a spiritual giant, Lee Edward Travis. He was one of the first people to record the brainwaves at UCLA. And so he was a mentor to me in this notion. And the class that I took with him was called self-healing. And so what we're talking about now is organic intelligence is also about self-healing and eventually leaning into the science of self-organizing systems, complex system science of self-organization. And Dr. Travis was, I think, 92 when I knew him and when he was teaching. And he and I would walk back to his office. He was the dean emeritus of the school. And I would walk with him back to his class, and he would take my arm as we would walk down the hall back to his office. And I was young at the time, and I felt like, well, I'm really doing this mentor of mine a favor, walking back with him. And as I matured, I realized it was he who was doing me the favor.
Yeah, it's funny what goes through our mind as a 20 something. And then we look back and go, there were lessons there that I was meant to find out later.
Right, right. Little seeds that
Yep.
took a while to sprout.
Yeah, that young Robin. Okay, so in your journey through schooling, you found your way to maybe more non-traditional methods of working with people and their trauma. So can you talk us through a little bit about I guess you could share a little bit with our listeners and viewers about the difference between traditional therapy methods and the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I was studying just orthodox clinical psychology, what's called a psychodynamic approach, kind of Freudian approach to therapy, and then began to work with children, and would do play therapy with children, and then discovered family therapy. And that was really important because it's a systems approach. You look at family system, and you're working not with an individual who you might think of as the identified patient, but you understand that that individual's symptoms are actually a reflection of the way the system or the relationships are becoming fixated, and the roles in the family are becoming rigid and fixated, so they've lost flexibility. And so I learned systems therapy, which was really informed by a mind body approach that was pioneered by a person named Milton Erickson. And Milton Erickson was one of the forebears of strategic therapy, of family therapy via Jay Haley, and also of hypnosis. And so his approach was understanding something about the nature of both our conscious awareness and the unconscious. That is, what is available to us as aware beings, but also the forces and the patterns of what's happening underneath. And that's really the biological system. Most of what we experience is not conscious because, it's autonomic. We have this autonomic system that is working. And so organic intelligence in some ways was born there because we began to recognize how much of our day-to-day existence is really an execution of biological programs and conditionings. And I began to work more directly with that. And organic intelligence to this day is that, but it is not by way of manipulating a system, but by way of seeing what is emergence, like seeing the wisdom of the robin as she's building the nest. We are seeing the wisdom in the other person that is building the nest. And it's just being missed because we're looking out for the hawk, and we're looking out for the bees and all the dangerous stuff. And we miss this still small voice, this quiet intelligence that is able to knit the fabric of our being and our physiology back together into a nest that is functional and relational. And that's where it came from.
I love that. And I like that we're going with this Robin scenario because it makes sense that nature just knows what to do. It's innate. They just, by the seasons and the way the weather changes, I mean, they take cues from different parts of their environment, but they know what to do next. And so if we listened to ourselves a little bit more so with the guidance of practitioners, I think we would be able to find more positivity and then work with that. Sounds like that's what your work is all about. Instead of focusing on the trauma and I guess overexposure to the negative, you're focusing on the positive to help your clients.
That's right. We're focusing on the positive. And there's even a prior step, which is right out of the contemplative approach or mindfulness, which is to focus on reality. The brain science is really clear right now that our brain is not the, hey, look out for the saber-toothed tiger brain, like, oh, you got to get ready to jump and run and fight and flight and freeze. Our brain is the predicting brain. Now, because the brain is getting us ready for what's coming, the brain is not reactive. We talk about prosilience, not resilience so much. We're talking about collaborating with a brain that is assessing what is in the environment and then getting us ready for what the next step is, what's coming, that readiness theme. And so we are really leaning into this idea of being present by connecting to the environment through the senses. That is, we help our brain do that readiness, not by focusing on the interior of what we usually think of in therapy. Oh, we're going to think about it. We're going to consider our feelings. We're going to work with our thoughts, or we're going to process trauma through feeling sensations or something. Those are all internal channels that are part of the model made from our past experience, right? The brain in its prediction is predicting and then it's creating a model. And so there is an existing kind of model for us, our conditioning, that is built on our past. And to whatever extent our past has been unsatisfactory, those elements of unsatisfactoriness get amplified by the negativity bias. And so when we are making predictions about what's coming, it is expected that those predictions will be based on what has happened in the past. And that means I'm often getting ready for the other shoe to drop. And so instead of focusing inward where the past lives, we're focusing outward where we know there is a tether into the present moment. And so we call it orientation, connecting to the environment through the senses, which helps us then give the brain the raw materials that help us get ready for what's coming. And when we feel ready, then we have a big emphasis on the positive. So if nothing is coming that is real, like fight, flight, and freeze material, then, if I am ready for the future, I can begin to choose how my attention goes and begin to amplify my energy in life by attending to those positive things. So that's kind of the relationship between a positive orientation and this nest of awareness that allows us to put those little eggs in there.
Yeah, I think that's a great visual for anybody listening and watching because, there's a lot of different approaches and methods to practitioners working with clients on trauma or, whatever our past looked like and getting us to move forward. But I like this growth focused approach of yours because it just seems one, it seems different than traditional methods. And two, it just seems to be more, I don't know, it seems like it's going to be more growth producing for clients because they're going to see benefits of focusing on the positive. I think when I'm trying to work on my, you know, whatever's been going on in my day or the last month, if I focus on the negative, I'm bringing my vibration down. It's not really scientifically based. I don't have any stats to back that up, but I just don't feel so great. But if I think about my future and what I want to achieve and how I want to feel and be positive, I can completely change my just overall vibration vibe. And I feel like that works for me. So if I were somebody looking to work with somebody like you around any trauma, I would want to work on the positive
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah, the science of that is that when we begin to think about the things that haven't worked, the things that were challenging, the things that were traumatic, then we evoke the state. We revive that state, which we know is really characterized by the catecholamines, the adrenalines, the cortisones, right? Like all the stress chemicals that are there. And so those stress chemicals wear us down over time. And so that's the result is what you're saying, which is we can have more positive energy or energy that we have sort of like a discretionary budget. We sometimes talk about managing the energy budget. And
Mm,
so if we are constantly running on a deficit, we're going paycheck to paycheck, day to day with I'm spending all my energy, I may be overspending energy, and that's really problematic. And so if we can shift our attention into one orientation where we're connected to the environment, where we're really in reality in the right now. And then we can begin to put deposits into the account of our life, and then have more positive energy to do what we want to do or do what we're here to do.
Yeah, I like that better. Instead of draining our energy to get the work and, everything cleared and handled, however you need to do that, it's better just to build forward and fill your energy with positive growth and motion that way. So that
Right.
makes sense.
Well, it's true also in terms, and this has been the amazing thing. I taught when I left graduate school. I tell people I ran away from graduate school and my dissertation, and ran away and joined the somatic circus. And so for 17 years, I trained people internationally in trauma, and in a somatic approach to trauma. And so it was then that I began to realize that actually there is a different way. And by starting with this orientation, people of their own began to recall and have different recollections, and they would have different conversations. So rather than having a trauma focused conversation, we just began to have a human conversation. We talk about the stuff that you talk about when you're like neighbors. How's your family? How's your garden this year? Well, the weather has been like this. And you just have a normal human conversation because, just as we said, when we're talking about what's wrong or the problem, that evokes a certain state. And so clients come into therapy, they expect that, and so they are self-stimulating states that are stress states. The therapist is often believing that that's what needs to happen. We need to talk about the problem, we need to find the source of the problem, we need to work on the solution to the problem, all of which keeps the problem the main focus. And that keeps the state of the individual in a stress state largely. And so instead, we begin to have conversations with people, just like normal human conversations, like you'd have with your neighbor. And in the midst of that, the biology is sending positive signals that are meant to stabilize and actually grow our state capacity. And so I started to notice that, and I started to be more interested in those kinds of things. Like, my kids are doing well at school. Yeah, Herb is, he spends a little time in the principal's office, but he seems to make a lot of friends. And so, as a therapist, I'd go, oh, what kind of problems is he having? What is the principal saying about his issues? Do you think he's maybe ADHD? But instead, I began to say, what kind of friends? How does he do that? How does he make those friends? And he has these amazing friends, and what we are doing, what our system is doing, is leaning us ourselves, not toward Herb, but toward ourselves, toward our own nature of human and social engagement, friendship and interrelatedness. And it becomes not a negative projection, which is what we in psychology think about, but a positive projection. And just by continuing the conversation in this symbolic way about Herb, air quotes, Herb, and his possibility of friendship, we're now talking about the state of social engagement, love, and relationship that is there for the client. And those states begin to come forward. And it's this amazing thing that the biology will very directly steer us toward an alternative narrative to trauma. And that alternative narrative will be that story about social engagement and Herb. And just by following that conversation, we are evoking an alternative healing state rather than the projective state about the problems in ADHD and the principal's office and all of the, all that implies. In other words, there's an associative network that is available for healing, growth, and development that has largely remained untapped. And that is the natural and, I believe, organically preferred way of dealing with what we have in the past called trauma. Because trauma is not, what's here right now. Trauma is a biology out of sync. And the messages about Herb and the social engagement, that's the message of a system trying to come back into natural sync.
Okay. So something clicked for me. I'm understanding a little bit more now that it helps the pathways sync in our brain. I mean, I'm
Exactly.
not a scientist, but that made sense to me.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay. So, knowing that there's lots of healing benefits to this approach, organic intelligence, what might be some other benefits along the lines of maybe helping our brain grow bandwidth, maybe, or any other benefits that you want to share?
Well, that's how we describe it is growing bandwidth, like getting your energy account with a little savings, a little bit. What is it? We're supposed to have like a 3 month, 6 month buffer, something like that. It's getting that buffer zone there. And the way it happens is so simple in a way, once we get orientation on board, which is a bit of a practice. But the amazing thing is that there is an abundance of signaling from our system, from the channels of awareness that are there to help us grow. And so we use an acronym for the channels of our perception, and they are image, the image channel, the visual images we can have in our mind, imagination. There's sensation, the body sensation channel. There's orientation, connecting to the environment through the senses. There's our meaning channel, the cognitions that we have, thought, and there is then affect or emotion. And the acronym is ISOMA. So image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect. And in most of those channels will be represented what's wrong. There is no kind of negative intention that's happening. It just keeps our system stable. That is, this what's wrong attention just keeps us stable. It keeps us kind of fixed. And like the body says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. All right. So just keep it the same. Keep the status quo is important. But instead, in each of these channels also will be coming messages of support. So in the thought channel and the image channel, somewhere there will be coming messages of support. And if it's okay, I would just point out that one of them has come up already as you were just talking, because your hands came in front of you almost in a prayer-like position. And if we were to feel that at that time, that's the message to one's system at that time. And there are a host of those. People will do this, or people will be like touching their thumb and stroking their arm, or rocking a little bit, or there will come an image, or I was working. Well, really, I discovered this by sitting in my therapy chair working with a client, and they would be looking out the window, and we had a bunch of milkweed at the time. There'd be a butterfly, like a monarch butterfly, floating by. So as we're in the midst of this intense conversation about you know who done them wrong, and their sister who said this, and their cousin who did that, in the midst of all of that, then they go, oh wow, I just saw a butterfly going around. And as a normal psychotherapist, I would have gone, oh, so they're avoiding their problems here by thinking about a butterfly. But one day, for whatever reason, I said, what if that is a better idea? And so I became interested with them in that butterfly. And as we did, a whole metaphor began to emerge about going from caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly, metamorphosis, because that's really where they were. Their life was in a transitional moment, and their system picked out the butterfly because that was the message. It wasn't what I was thinking with all my psychological training. It was their system who said, butterfly, that's where we're going. And I began to trust that impulse that was coming around.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit of picking up on the signs that are around you and what you're drawn to as a client or practitioner. And hopefully they merge together. Like you said, you decided to go with your client on that journey, which I think is, it's interesting that you had all this training and you decided to question it to see if there's a benefit to going in a different direction, which I think is very valuable to hear in this day and age. Because just because something's been done a certain way for so many, you know, eons or years or centuries, whatever, doesn't mean that we have to keep doing it the same way.
That's right. It really goes right back to Freud. So I guess that's been what 100 years, which isn't really that long, to figure us out. I think we should probably keep an eye on the Tibetans, right, who have been doing this for about, working on the mind for about 1,000 years. But you're right that a new way is possible and is opened up. And what I found was, I mean, there are plenty of critiques about how things are going right now. I mean, the biggest one is, well, everybody's taking advantage of therapy, and our society is falling apart. So there's more treatment, there's more knowledge apparently about our psychology and healing, and we've got more people exploring big pharma solutions of medications for antidepressants, like, right? And I'm not saying that that's bad. It's not. It can be really necessary. I'm just saying that the need for these is growing as apparently we are doing better in psychotherapy. So I don't know that there is the proof of that. There is also a thing that's happening, which is that, in all the methods of treatment, they're all looking for empirical support, like really empirically supported, research supported are the gold standard for one, getting insurance payments, but two, for, selling your courses. But but the research that is supporting many of those processes has not been able to be replicated.
Mm,
So even the research supported approaches are now under question. And it's called in psychology is stepping back and going, whoa, what have we done here? And what do we need to do to fix this? Because there's the replicability crisis. That is, the approaches that were thought to be like having support are actually they can't even be replicated. So
mm.
there is literal reasons and not just outcome reasons. There are practical research-based reasons to question it. And then lastly, I wrote an article, and there's an article that we wrote in a book called Somatic Oriented Therapies by it's edited by Stupigia Grassman and Stephen Porges. And it's the book it's a chapter entitled Post-Trauma Growth: Guardrails and Guidelines. And in that chapter, I make the case for this issue of the replicability crisis and suggest that the reason for unwanted, unintended, and under researched harm in therapy is because of the negative intensity, the high intensity that comes when you're focusing on trauma, when you're focusing on the sensations of trauma, when you're focusing on what's wrong, that for some people can be really helpful, and for some people it can be devastating. And I don't think we have a good count for how many people have adverse effects from treatment, but I think it's undercounted and it is for sure under researched. And so we are hoping to provide an impulse in the field for doing exactly what you're suggesting, which is to really question the status quo of what we're doing, because there is a safer way, and we believe it's also more humane and human in its results, and that's what we're trying to get across to our coaches, but also to the field of therapy as a whole. So our like resilience course is called the End of Trauma course, because
Mm,
we believe that treatment doesn't need to be focused on trauma. It needs to be focused on the emergence within the person of their own self healing tendencies and experiences.
I like that. And while it is a gentler approach, you are backing it up with practice and lots of results to share from clients.
We do.
You have a website with other articles also, correct?
That's right. That's right. I think the article right now on the website is a positive psychology or a positive reinforcement, non directive approach for trauma and addiction. So, positive reinforcement and non directive. So, we're having that free association conversation instead of priming the system for what's wrong in all the stress states. And it all hinges, honestly, on this practice, this mindfulness practice of orientation, as connecting to the environment through the senses. When people get that, then the resources really start coming up much more clearly. So it's not just about positive reinforcement or positive signals of self organization. It's also about the way that we assist the predicting brain to get us ready, and the feeling of readiness then evokes these associations that are the messages of our stabilization and healing. And I think about this for parents also. That's the other thing that might be important for your listeners, because many of us are parents, and we are so trained to have people reflect on oh, what are you feeling? Oh, why is that? And what's happening? And we inadvertently point our kiddos back to their internal experience where they're less resourced. And
Mm.
so instead, we might be just interested in what their attention is going to out in the environment. Oh, what is that? Is that a bird? Is that a bee? Is that a flowers? Is it the sun shining? Is it warm? Getting the attention out and just like going for a walk and then talking about what's out there, is really important. We're attuning, we're with people where they are with their emotions and so on. And to include in that the contact with the external environment, like play therapy, you're there with blocks, you're there with Legos. Oh, I need a blue one. I need one in this shape. Do you have one in this shape? And we are paying attention to the external environment. And that will really help tether our little people into the current environment and help their brain do that readiness process as well.
I like that. Kind of in education speak, we would redirect, if a student was going off on a tangent or having a tantrum or, situation, we would just redirect to something. But it's good to know that it's good practice to focus on something in the environment.
Right? To redirect children's behavior, redirect to the environment a little bit, what's being
Mhm.
seen or heard, and especially when they're doing it, because kids will do it naturally. They'll
Mhm.
begin to look around, and oftentimes then they're like, "Hey, pay attention here," but instead let them do that. Or, I'm sorry, this is going on a bit, or you will see them in a reverie. Like,
Mm.
they'll just be kinda spaced out and kinda staring off, and instead of going what we often do is say, "Hey, snap out of it. Hey, earth to Harold, earth to Harold." Instead of any of that, take a moment just to allow that reverie to complete, and then they will come back, and then they'll orient.
Mm.
So we don't interrupt. That's a stage of like you would think of like a light stage of freeze or something like that, and letting that finish. And by completing that cycle, you'll know it because then they'll come back. And then when they come back, that's when you re-engage. And then you're like, oh yeah, how is things looking out there? Yeah, I see that. What is that? Is that a tree or is that, and then you're redirecting from the reverie then back to the exterior environment. That's another little trick there.
Okay, that's good to know too for anybody working with little ones or middle schoolers, whatever age you are working
Middle
with.
aged.
Yeah, no, it's good. And to have that patience of going slow to go fast so you can really build that relationship and refocus when it's necessary.
Yeah. And when it's in tune with the person's natural rhythms of like coming back.
That's great advice. So, for those out there listening and watching, if they are interested in learning more about you and your approach to this type of therapy, where can they find you?
Yep. We're Organic Intelligence, and that's organicintelligence.org. And I would just say that while it is my approach, we've focused really on teaching our teachers and focused on really supporting our community. Because in the end, this approach is about everybody. We say organic intelligence, that's you. And so my approach is to help people find themselves. And so that's really key because there are a lot of things offered out there. You flip through Instagram and there's all the somatics, and then there is the psychedelics, and then there is the meditations. Those are a lot of stuff out there. And you could dunk yourself in cold water, and there are benefits to that. The yoga. There's a lot of good things out there, and in the end, what we are offering is a reflection of one's own being. So the approach is really to offer a reflection of oneself in their most healthy and wholesome way.
Yes. And just any final thoughts that you might have besides just, thinking about all the things that are out there and really trying to find what works for you, what might be your advice for listeners and viewers to think about how to apply strategies for lasting change?
I think one, yeah, organic intelligence. We have a really well-developed, well-organized curriculum that has really good results. So that's a thing. But the single most important activity, I believe, is to naturally and easefully bring your senses into the environment. That the focus interior is the focus on one's conditioning. And I'm not saying it needs to be exclusively and all attention out there, but adding that practice as a primary practice, at least for a time, is going to make a big difference. Everybody who does this work of orientation begins to feel better once they get the hang of it, because you look outside or you look in the room and you go, gosh, there's so much to clean up in here, and the attention goes quickly over to what's wrong. But that means it goes over to a thought, or it goes over to a feeling, or it goes over to a sensation. And so you just expect that. And in true meditative style, you just notice, like, oh yeah, I just began to go into Judgeville. So now I'll come back and just see the trees and just see the color and just hear the birds. I just hear the echo in the room. Very neutral, very like almost non-interesting. Getting back to neutral through orientation, that's a huge step. And the more you practice it, the more value you'll see to just coming back to the everyday, ordinary here and
So kind of a notice whatever's going on and allow, but refocus as much as you can. Okay. Okay. All right. You've gotten me thinking about lots of different ways that I might be able to improve my practice. So I'm hoping others out there are interested to know more. So we'll make sure all the contact information for your organic intelligence program platform approach is all in the show notes, and you can find out more there. Definitely. I so appreciate you coming on the show today, Stephen.
awesome. Thank you too. Yeah, so appreciate you.
What a meaningful and expansive conversation today with Stephen. And it just reminds us that healing isn't something that's forced. It's something that we allow. And when we create the right conditions, growth will naturally follow. If this episode resonated with you, I hope that you take a moment to reflect on where you might be pushing too fast and where your body might be asking you to slow down a little bit more. Because that's the heart of this work. That's how we truly grow, by going slow to eventually go fast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, I hope that you will subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with those you know who need it, and leave a review because it helps others find us, and so we can keep growing our community online, in the podcasting space, and also on YouTube. As always, I'm just so grateful that you're here and that you keep coming back and listening in. If you are already a subscriber, thank you. And just remember, until next week or next time, whenever you choose to listen, the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast, and thanks for listening.